Hello, it's me Amelia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about A Court of Silver Flames, or the original cover, the ugly one right here. So A Court of Silver Flames is the fourth book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. It's Nessa and Cassian's book. I was really excited. As you all know, I made so many videos on this book pre-release. So I finished it a week after it was released, but I didn't film any review because I needed time to gather my thoughts. I find that when I just finish a book, my thoughts are very different from taking time to think about it. So now that I've gathered all my thoughts, I have so much to say. Overall, I gave this book I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads, but in my head it's more like 2.879135 out of 5. And how I would describe this book is in a reference of a cake. You know, it's like you put in all these great ingredients, you put in the right amount of everything, you mix it perfectly with the right equipment, but then you put it in the oven for too long and then it ends up being burned and you can't even eat the cake. And by that I mean the story was set up to be something that would be so good. You know, halfway into the book, I was like, this is a 5-star book. This is so good. I love it. My favorite ACOTAR book. And then towards the end, I was like, oh my god, like this is so bad. The way things were built up were so good. Things were built up so well, and then it just wasn't executed well at all. It was not okay. This book really disgusted me in a lot of manners and really upset me. And like, it hurts to say that because I love Nessa and Cassian, but if I keep looking down, I wrote 11 pages of notes. It's a chaotic mess. So besides for the fact that this book didn't have a plot, I was waiting for the plot to kick in, but it wasn't gonna kick in because there really is no plot except for character-driven conflicts. The plot was almost non-existent. For an adult fantasy book, that's not okay. I find that besides the romance, ACOTAR is known for its feminist qualities and progressiveness, and then with this book, it's like you're back into the 1500s when women couldn't make their own decisions. You know, the misogyny in this book, I can't. It definitely seems like a feminist book on the outside, you know, with women winning the right and women in power. But then you look at the details and it's a feminist failure. That's not the only problem I have with this book. There's so much, oh my gosh. I'm gonna begin with the things I loved about this book, because if it weren't for these things, I would have given this book 0 stars. There were a lot of things that I really appreciated, and one of that is the hero's journey. I think Nessa's journey was done really well. I loved seeing how her mind shifted over time and how her attitude would change over time as she was able to come to terms with her past and her actions and just herself in general, even though this was ruined by the end. I really loved the way the book was set up, you know, her in a house with Cassian and Azrael and her learning to train, and she's basically trapped with Cassian, who she has a lot of chemistry with, and I was really excited for that, and that's why like halfway into the book I was like 5 stars, yes. Moreover, I feel like this book was really relatable for people with trauma or people who can see themselves in Nessa's shoes. I know that a lot of people were able to relate to Nessa's situation, and this book helped them, so I think it represented that really well. And what I also really loved was the way that you felt like you were in Nessa's shoes through the writing. I literally felt like I was her. Whenever someone was rude to her, I was so offended. Whenever she was hurt, I was hurt. I think that really demonstrates Sarah J Maas's ability at writing characters and encapsulating the human condition in her writing. It's something she's always been consistent with, so I really have to commend her for that. I thought that part was amazing. I'm really sorry for the music in the background from someone else's house. I felt like Nessa was really vulnerable in the beginning. You know, she thought that everyone hated her, and she even hated herself and blamed herself for a lot of things that happened, and I love how that changed over time. I also really loved seeing Cassian's insecurities, which we didn't know about before. You know, seeing through his relationship with Eris, even though Cassian wasn't really given a character arc because that was never solved. And I really love Cassian and Nessa's banter. You know, we would see Nessa's mind process before she would say something mean to Cassian. And Cassian would just be like, let's hear it, Ness, because he just wanted her to get things out of her system or hear what she wanted to say and what she wanted to insult him with. You know, I really loved their banter, their conversations. Okay, so So before we dive into my main problems with the characters, relationships, and the inner circle, and everything that I felt was wrong with this book, I'm gonna talk a little about the plot. I felt like Sarah J Maas just wanted to write her characters like having fun and their journey and them spending time together, but she had to make that a book, and because of that, she had to force in a plot that she didn't even want, that she didn't even care about, that I don't think the audience even cared about. I think that's very, very clear. There's two forces driving the story, the character-driven force and the plot. The plot is almost non-existent. You know, we have Koschei, we have the human queen Brialyn. Basically, the war is over and they're trying to, I guess, rebuild and divide territories. And what's driving that plot is the fact that they have to find these 3 objects before these villains find them first, which firstly, that is so cheap and reused. You know, in Throne of Glass, you're trying to find 3 word keys. In Akomath and Akawar, you're trying to find the book and the cauldron legs. And then in Crescent City, they're looking for the horn. And I just remember thinking, is this the only type of plot Sarah J Maas can come up with in her books? Like, nothing else. You just have to keep looking for items. Back to the villains, they were supposed to be these 2 scary people that literally no one cared about. I feel like the villains were really cheap and defeated really easily. You know, they didn't appear throughout the entire book. And then the moment Brialyn appears to Nessa, she kills her that minute. The villain was defeated the moment our main character faced her. That's not a good book. It was so convenient. It wasn't riveting. It wasn't suspenseful. Like, this girl is a threat that you talk about throughout the entire book, and then the moment you see her, she's dead. Just like that. I think comparing this conflict to the Amarantha conflict in Akatar, or the Akomath conflict, or the war in Akawar, it can't be compared at all. This book was like nothing. I kept waiting for like a big plot to kick in, but it never did. The audience wasn't like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Because the story wasn't set up to be something that the audience would even care about. Like, don't tell me you cared what was gonna happen with them. Like, I don't think the author even cared. What makes the plot of the book bad is also because they're just looking for these 3 items, right? Before someone else finds it. And like, that's it. Like, you're just looking for items. Like, who cares? Koschei appears for like 1 chapter and then he's like gone. Like, why should we care about this dude? We literally know nothing about him. But regardless, I don't think I care that much that the plot wasn't done well, just because I did read this for Nessa and Cassian's romance, and Sarah J Maas, I understand that she wrote this for Cassian and Nessa, so I understand why the main plots and conflicts, like the politics, took a backseat. But because it's an adult fantasy book, I don't think it should have taken a backseat. As an adult fantasy book, it wasn't carefully crafted in the slightest. And that's just an objective viewpoint. As a critical reader, it's something that I have to mention. Moreover, I think the pacing was really off. The book was really slow in the beginning, which I didn't have a problem with in the beginning because, you know, it's Nessa and Cassian and their romance is developing. But then the last 5% becomes really rushed, where a bunch of things happen. You know, Nessa is just waking up, training, working in the library, sleeping, waking up, eating, training, and like that just kept happening, and I kept waiting for something to kick in, and it didn't until the last 5%. So that was like a weird balance. So the book started off with Nessa going to train with Cassian at the House of Wind, which already threw me off because at the end of A Court of Frost and Starlight, we have Cassian saying, "You're coming with me to the Illyrian Mountains." So I feel like everyone expected the book to take place in the Illyrian Mountains, and then it just didn't. So that was an interesting change. I guess Sarah J Maas realized that the Illyrian Mountains wouldn't work. I thought it was a bit random though, because they wanted her out of Valaris. So Up in the House of Wind is still in Valaris. And it's also a bit weird that they're making her train. Like, she's depressed and she's going through trauma, right? Like, what does training have to do with this? Like, imagine you're like really depressed and your friends are like, I'm sending you to go train. Like, how does that even relate? I mean, I guess it worked in the end, so good for them. Besides that, the beginning also really threw me off because of the way that Amren and Feyre and Rhysand, but I'll talk about Rhysand later. He's my main problem with this book. Rhysand's my main problem. The way Amren and Feyre treated Nessa in the beginning was not okay. Amren literally suggested to Feyre that instead of the other option being going to the mortal lands, that they send her to a dungeon in the hewn city for a couple of days to fix her behavior. Send her to a dungeon in the hewn city. a dungeon in the Court of Nightmares to heal a girl's trauma. Imagine Feyre going through her trauma and Rhysand like putting her in a cage. I'm sorry, like this book was so weird. Like it didn't make sense. And Feyre objected to that, not because that was so dehumanizing and a person going through trauma shouldn't be put into a dungeon for a few days to fix their behavior, but because the human lands would be enough of a prison. So you want to send her to prison. Like, why? It really pissed me off. I feel like the inner circle, they're very understanding of trauma and they help each other through trauma. But then with Nessa, it's like, let's send her to a dungeon. Let's send her to a prison. Let's force her into a house she doesn't want to go to, even though she's literally not doing anything that if you did it in the real world today, you would be put into rehab. I feel like Feyre didn't act like Feyre. You know, there were some things she would say that if this book was written in Feyre's perspective, it wouldn't have been said. Like, you don't have life. Like, you don't say that to a person who's going through what Nessa's going right now. And I understand that it's Nessa's perspective, so Feyre is painted more of an antagonist, but objectively, these things were still said that weren't okay. I think Feyre really acted out of character, and then more specifically, I want to talk about page 34. Feyre tells Nessa that she spent 500 gold marks last night, and that was Feyre's breaking point because, and I quote, "Do you know how much money that is? Do you know how embarrassed I was when I got the bill this morning and my friends, my family had to hear about it? It's about how it reflects upon me, upon Rhys, upon my court. When my damn sister spends money on wine and gambling and does nothing to contribute to the city. If my sister cannot be controlled, then why should I have the right to rule over anyone else? If my own sister cannot be controlled." Sorry, Feyre, that's so embarrassing for you to say. Like, that's your older sister you're talking about, and your breaking point is that it looks bad on you and that you can't control her and it makes you not fit to rule, not because your sister is going through something major. I found that really unlike Feyre, that she cared more about her image, that her image was her breaking point, not Nessa's mentality and health and wellness and situation. The thing is, I know that Feyre cares about Nessa. I've been in Feyre's head. I know she cares, but we're in Nessa's head right now. And if Feyre says that to Nessa, how will Nessa know that Feyre is concerned for her when Feyre is only talking about her image and how it reflects upon Rhysand? At that same scene, Feyre also says, "You're going even if you have to be tied up and hauled there," which, considering Nessa was literally hauled into the cauldron against her will, that was so insensitive to say. I want to say that Feyre saying these things is fine if she apologizes in the end, but the thing is, by the end, Nessa was the only one who did any apologizing, but others hurt her as well. And especially because Feyre didn't have any choices in a court of mist and fury because of Tamlin, and now the inner court is giving Nessa no choice. Don't tell me the two choices they gave her with the human lands was a choice. That's not a choice. Like, you will follow Cassian, you will follow Clotho's orders. It's like Tamlin saying, you will stay in the house, you will follow my orders. And at this point, I just think that Nessa needed a Rhysand to save her from the Tamlin that was Feyre. Nessa is a grown-ass woman, and I think that forcing her into involuntary rehab was not okay because besides the money that she was spending, which they could have just stopped, Nessa wasn't hurting anyone. She wasn't doing something super bad. You know, yeah, she slept around, but should someone go to rehab because they're sleeping around? Should someone go to rehab because they're drinking alcohol? After the war, Moore also used alcohol and sleeping around to deal with her trauma, so that's okay for Moore, but it's not okay for Nessa. I see where they're coming from, though. I know they're concerned. At the end of the day, it worked, but I don't think that makes it okay, and I don't agree with it. And then we have them tearing down Nessa's apartment because they don't like her being there, and the place is being rebuilt as a shelter for families displaced by the war. Now, I have a major problem with this. Imagine someone coming to you and just saying, yeah, we're tearing down your house today. Like, that was Nessa's place for herself, and the fact that she didn't even get to say goodbye to it or anything, like, sure, it was ugly, but that was her home, and to just tear it down without her consent, without consulting her, and not only that, okay, there are other rooms in that building. The fact that the whole building is being torn down because Rhysand and Feyre didn't like Nessa there. So for other people staying in that building, they built their life there. Everything they own is there. It's their home, it's their place. And the fact that Rhysand is gonna tear it down because they didn't like Nessa's behavior, and because of that they're affecting other people's lives and other people don't get to consent to their homes being taken down, was not okay with me. I think that's really selfish of the inner circle. Like, imagine someone taking away your home and tearing it down just because they didn't like the behavior of someone else in that building. Like, is that just me? Like, that's not okay. They didn't even ask the people in that building if they were okay with it. They just asked the landlord. Like, there's other people staying there too. Like, I can't. Like, that's so selfish. Also, the fact that besides the wine and the gambling, they sent her up there because she was sleeping around, right? And they wanted to fix that behavior. But then in the house with Cassian, Azrael and Rhysand know that she's also sleeping with Cassian. But they know that because they sent it. So doesn't that make it, like, pointless? She can't do it with other men, but she can with Cassian. If the point is to eliminate and control her sexual life, then why is she allowed to do it with Cassian? Like, yes, you can do it with Cassian, but no one else. Like, why are you controlling her choices? We don't care that you're sleeping around to numb your pain as long as it's with Cassian. And also, the fact that they're sending her to a war camp to train, like, why would you send a person really traumatized by war to a war camp? Like, these people are really stupid. They're so old, but they're so stupid. I really hated how the other members of the inner circle treated Nessa. Like, when Mor said, you don't deserve the kindness that good men like Cassian give you. And I guess that's fine to say. I mean, yeah, it's terrible, but it would be okay if Mor apologized. But no one apologized to Nessa about anything by the end of the book, and that threw me. That's what made me, like, finish this book and was like, oh my god. Mor never apologized for that. Amren slut-shamed her so much. Amren said things that you shouldn't say, like, you're a pathetic waste of life. You know, Nessa's going through so much. She has so much trauma, and it's like, you're a pathetic waste of life. And there's, like, no heart-to-heart talk with Amren. You know, they were best friends, sort of, and then they fought, and there was no solution. You know, if you want to make this book about Nessa's journey and her healing and her becoming okay with the inner circle again, why don't we have apologies being said? Why don't we have actual solutions? It was like suddenly Nessa sacrificed her powers, which I'm gonna get into. So mad. But we have Nessa sacrificing her powers, and because of that, like, everything's fine and they're, like, happy again. But where's the actual solution here? We don't have Nessa speaking with Elaine, like, I'm sorry I said this, or like Elaine apologizing, like, I'm sorry I said this. It was just like everything's fine suddenly, like, we're all good, which I thought this book would be about them being okay and, like, coming back together, but it was so sudden and random. I felt like there was no development towards that, except for Nessa sacrificing her powers, which makes me really angry. Regarding Cassian and Nessa being mates, I feel like if you watch my videos, you know my thoughts on them being mates, because in my predictions video, I said that I didn't want them to be mates, and they were mates. And I was actually spoiled for this because I went on the ACOTAR Wikipedia page, or whatever page, and it was like, Nessa, Cassian, mates. So we know that mates are supposed to be rare, right? Like, really rare. You know, you can go 100 of years and not find your mates. And I think it's really unrealistic that all the Archeron sisters found their mates, and they're all, like, in the same crowd. And I hate so much that Nessa and Cassian were mates, because why didn't anyone sense it? You know, the moment Feyre became Fae, Rhysand sensed the mate. The moment Elaine became Fae, Lucian sensed the matery, the mating bond. But no one sensed them being mates. The thing is, we don't even know if anyone sensed them being mates, because we didn't get any of the inner circle's thoughts on them being mates. It's like, yeah, we're mates, let's have a party. But it's like, did Azrael know they were mates? We know that Cassian knew they were mates. Did Azrael know? Did Rhysand know? What's Feyre's thoughts on them being mates? Did Rhysand and Feyre predict this? Did they know? Did Mor know? Did Amren know? We don't know. Why didn't we know? Like, I want to know. Like, did Azrael know about this? Like, we didn't get that. I never mentioned why I don't want them to be mates, and I guess it's because in previous books, Sarah J. Maas said that the mating bond is just decided based on who can create the strongest offspring, so it's not always correct in terms of soulmates. And I guess I wanted to explore that, how you don't have to be mates with someone to be in love with them, but then we got Feyre and Rhysand 2.0, and I just didn't like that. I really disliked the way it was revealed that they were mates. It was so, like, anticlimactic. I forgot how Cassian said it, but it was like, we're mates. Like, it was so lame. I feel like the romance, in the beginning, it was done well. Like, it built up to be a good romance. But at the end of the day, it was just, like, smut. They're, like, sleeping together. And then it's like, we're mates. I love you. But there was no or very little real romance leading up to that. Because, you know, whenever one of them went through something, they would fix it with sex. But then there's no real solution. You know, Cassian's Insecurities, I don't think there was any real solution. Nessa just, like, fixed it with smut. So much smut in this book, and that's fine. Sarah J. Maas wrote this for the smut, but I wanted the Feyre Rhysand romance as well. Like, there was so little romance. I think that made the romance a little bit lazy. I do appreciate their banter and the sexual tension, but I feel like there could have been so much more. And because of that, the I love you, which Cassian never even said I love you to Nessa throughout this whole book. I think only Nessa said it to Cassian, but the I love you became a bit random. I mean, yeah, there was that scene on Solstice where they, like, confessed, but that's just one scene, right? But there's no, like, actual romantic development towards the I love you besides for, like, the physical relationship. I still really enjoyed their romance. I just think that the smut overtook it, and I don't think that it should have if that meant less romance. Speaking of Cassian, I really love Cassian. You know, he was my favorite, now it's Azrael. He was my favorite bad boy. But as much as I love Cassian, I like him a little less in this book. I feel like in the previous books, Cassian was painted as this war general who commands Rhysand's armies. You know, he's an Illyrian fighter, he's a warrior god, he's amazing, and he's good at, like, war and politics. And in Feyre's perspective, I was like, oh my god, this man. But then in this book, he was dumbed down to this horny male who didn't know anything about court politics. You've been doing this for 500 years. You're Rhysand's, what, like, second in command or third in command, or you're Rhysand's general, and you don't know anything. Like, you can't perform court politics stuff. Like, I just don't think that that's believable. I appreciated seeing his insecurities, which were never solved, but, like, that's just not realistic to me. We didn't get to see the greatness that made Cassian so great because he was always like, oh, Nessa's boobs. Like, so now we're gonna talk about Rhysand. Rhysand is my main problem with this book. Everything that made me hate this book was mainly about Rhysand. I hate him. I can't believe I'm saying this. Like, do you know how much, like, Rhysand merch I have? Me looking around for my Rhysand merch. I swear, I have Rhysand merch. I really hated Rhysand's treatment of Nessa because, yeah, Nessa is horrible, but Rhysand, you were worse, okay? You've done things worse than Nessa. You've killed so many people. And, like, and you're mad at Nessa for being terrible. Like, take a look in the mirror. Like, yeah, you didn't want to do those things, but you still did them. And he still chose to do things he didn't have to do. That was terrible, right? Right? I'm sure he did. And it's like you hate Nessa so much, she's terrible, but, like, you're worse than her, so what are you on right now? It's like he had no heart. He was just flexing his authority to Nessa and, like, controlling her. I just didn't like that. And oh my god, I have so many problems with Rhysand. We have Feyre's pregnancy. So Sarah J. Maas wanted to write Feyre being pregnant, and she tried to incorporate that into the plot, which failed badly in my opinion. You know, this was Breaking Dawn Part 1. I read this and I was like, oh my god, it's Breaking Dawn again. I mean, I love Breaking Dawn, but personally, I didn't like the pregnancy trope, and I'm not gonna get too much into this because I know that everyone has their own opinion on this. I remember writing something in some Facebook Sarah J. Maas group that I didn't want Feyre to be pregnant in this book. It was like a discussion about her pregnancy, and someone replied to me and was like, I was pregnant when I was young and it didn't ruin my life, and they like attacked me, and I was like, I'm sorry, like I just don't want her to be pregnant this young. Like I understand that like it's different for everyone, but I just feel like Feyre talked so much about how she wanted to live a lot of years first before having a baby, and then the author got pregnant and suddenly Feyre wants to get pregnant. I just don't, to me it's not believable. I understand that everyone has their own preference, but I just think that it's really dumb, especially because they know that a war is coming, so it's like, why are you... And don't even get me started on the bargain that Feyre and Rhysand made, that they binded their lives together, because firstly you decide to have a baby, right? So binding your lives together, if one of you die, if the mom dies, the baby will also have no dad. If the dad dies, the baby will also have no mom, which was so stupid. Also the fact that they're gonna leave the Night Court without a ruler, because if the High Lord dies, the High Lady's also dead. If the High Lady dies, the High Lord's also dead. So like, who's gonna rule the world? Like, they don't even care about the world. They don't even care about their own child. It's just like, we love each other. And it was just really stupid. I don't think it's believable. I don't think that Akamath, Feyre, and Rhysand would do this. I feel like Akamath, Feyre, and Rhysand, or Akawar, Feyre, and Rhysand would be so much smarter because they're like intelligent people, but then like, I don't know what happened. And we have Rhysand keeping Feyre's pregnancy from her. You don't get to decide what someone knows about their own life, about their own health, about their own wellness. Was he just gonna let Feyre die? I mean, I know that he didn't tell Feyre because he didn't want to make her unhappy because she was being so happy and he was looking for a solution, but no solution worked. So was he just gonna let her die without letting her know that these are her last few months? You know, what if she wanted to spend her last few months doing something specific? Firstly, Feyre could have decided to shapeshift. We know that shapeshifting into an Illyrian for the birth giving is possible, but it might kill the baby. But with her giving birth, it will kill Feyre and the baby. So shouldn't they have tried shapeshifting? You know, Rhysand didn't tell Feyre anything to the point where Feyre couldn't decide what she wanted to do with her own body because she didn't know about it. And that was just not okay. You know, what if Feyre wanted to get an abortion to save herself instead of having her and the baby died? I feel like Rhysand would know that Feyre wouldn't want to abort the baby, but the thing is, he didn't give her that choice. And Rhysand is about choice, so by not telling her, he gave her no choice about her own body, about what she wanted to do in the situation that she was given. And if she was gonna risk the birth giving process, what if she wanted to spend her last few months doing something specific? She didn't get to know. Besides Nessa telling her, which I'll get into later, Feyre didn't know anything, and that's just not okay because Rhysand is this guy that's all about choice, and suddenly he became Tamlin 2.0 because Tamlin didn't tell Feyre things to keep her happy, to keep her safe inside the house and just be really happy about the wedding and everything. But Rhysand was that guy who would be like, Feyre, this is happening, you have to know these things. But then with this book, it's like, oh, I'm gonna keep her happy, I'm not gonna tell her anything, which is exactly what Tamlin would have done. So I don't know what made Sarah J. Maas think it was a good decision for Rhysand to turn into a Tamlin 2.0, and it makes me really angry. Like, I wasn't, the night I finished this book, I wasn't able to sleep because I was so mad at Rhysand for that. In A Court of Wings and Ruin, Rhysand literally sent Feyre back into the Spring Court as a spy, knowing that Tamlin would hurt her, knowing that she would go through a lot of things that would make her unhappy, but they still did, but he still did it because it would help the world and they were still there for each other. Like, where is Akawar Rhysand? Like, where is he? Like, where did he go? I think it was really disgusting, and I think that it was something that Akamath Rhysand would have punched Akos Rhysand for. And then he got mad when Nessa told Feyre that she was gonna die if she gave birth and the baby was gonna die, which Rhysand got mad at Nessa for, and I understand that Nessa didn't have the best intentions with that, but the fact that Rhysand wanted to kill his mate's sister for telling her something about her own body, her own baby, like, oh my god, I can't. But I really love that in the mountains with Cassian, right after that, when Cassian took her to the mountains, I loved how powerful that scene was. You could feel that she wanted to die. Like, the writing there was so strong. I have to commend Sarah J. Maas for that. That scene was done really well. I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes. It was so impactful. It was probably the best scene. Debatable, but it was one of the best scenes in this book. Okay, now we're back to Rhysand again with his choice. So him and the inner circle, or some of them, didn't want Nessa to know about her own powers. They voted not to tell Nessa that she could make these swords, whatever. Yeah, that was a huge Tamlin move. Rhysand wasn't okay with Tamlin hiding Feyre's powers of the Seven High Lords from her because she deserved to know about herself and deserved to use and learn about her own powers. So Rhysand taught her how to use her power. Suddenly he voted to hide Nessa's powers from her, which I think was so disgusting and so funny. It's like yes for Feyre, but no for Nessa. Cassian barely stood up for Nessa, if he did at all. There were a couple scenes, but you know, when you know that someone is keeping information from your mate and you just don't even care, and it's about her own powers, like, that just felt really weird. I also found it really ridiculous that Cassian didn't stand up for Nesta when Rhysand said, take her out of Velaris or I'm gonna kill her. That's your mate threatened to be killed, and you just like, you're like, okay, sure. Like, sure, you want to kill my mate, that's fine, I'll take her away. Like, from what we know about mates and what Sarah has stressed on, it's like, you can't let your mate die. Like, you kill anyone who threatened to kill your mate. So the fact that Cassian was like, okay, yeah, like, I'll take her to the mountains because you want to kill my mate, it's just, like, that's so weird. Okay, and then we have Nessa saving Feyre and the baby by sacrificing her powers. That was very convenient, that was very unrealistic, and it shows that this world that Sarah J. Maas has built has no real magical rules. Whatever Sarah wants to happen will happen, and I think that Nessa shouldn't have lost her power because her going into that cauldron was a really traumatic experience. It took away her human qualities, and because of that, she took something back, but now she lost her powers for Faysand and the baby. And I get that it was like, I've done so many bad things to you, so here's my powers to save you. But then it's like, why are women or females in Sarah J. Maas's books always sacrificing their powers? Like, just let them be strong women with like amazing powers. I don't think it was poetic that she lost her power to save Feyre. I thought that it was really disappointing, and I thought that it was a bad writing choice. This is me from the future. I already finished this video and took out my makeup and I look disgusting, but there was one point that I forgot to mention, and that's the fact that Nessa changed her body anatomy to fit an Illyrian baby. So we know that Nessa hated being Fae, and she didn't like the word mates because it took away her last few human qualities, so she really valued being human. So the fact that she spent her last few moments of having a lot of power to change her body anatomy to fit an Illyrian baby was not realistic to me at all, and it made me honestly really mad. It didn't feel like something that Nessa would do. This is a voice recording I sent to my friend when I just finished reading the book, and I'm gonna play it because I feel like it'll explain me myself better. Like, Nessa hated Fae, right? Like, she just hates everything about Fae, and like at the end she literally changed her body anatomy to support a Fae baby. And like, I know that like she wants to have babies with Cass, but I feel like everything that Nessa believed in and like her core was just totally changed in this book, and she just became like a Feyre, and like I don't know, by the end it was just like not Nessa anymore. I don't know. Yeah, that's perfectly what I meant. I feel like Nessa wouldn't have done that, changing her body to become more Fae when she didn't like the word mates, because her not having a mate made her feel more human. So I just don't believe that she would change her body anatomy. It didn't fit with her core values or anything. I found it really weird that no one sensed, or I think no one sensed because we didn't get to know about it, but no one sensed that they were mates except for Lanthis, because there was a scene with Lanthis and when in the prison world, or whatever it's called, and Lanthis was like, he said something like, oh, I can sense it, you guys are, and I know he was about to say mates. That's when I realized, like, oh, but then Cassian cut him off. So like, if Lanthis could sense it, like, why did no one else sense it? That was just really weird to me. I'm really glad that Nessa found her own friends. I think that's awesome, but at the same time, I feel like Emery and Gwyn were a bit underdeveloped, and by that I mean they were, well, I don't want to say this, but I felt like they were defined by their trauma. No, they weren't defined by their trauma, but their personality trait was that they went through a lot of things and they were strong and overcame it. Like Emery, she had a misogynistic family, but she's strong. But like, what else about her? You know? Like Gwen, like she also went through trauma and she's still strong and she's still willing to learn to fight. But like, what else? You know, it's like Sarah Wright sees women as like yeah, I've gone through trauma and I overcame it. But like, what else about them? Like, what other qualities do they have? Like, yeah, Emery likes to read smut and Gwen likes to sing. But I just wanted it to be more dimensional. Like, I wanted to know more. Like, I didn't care about them because there was just nothing for me to care about. I wish that other aspects of them were developed as well. And then we have the scene where Cassian went to save Eris while Nessa was in the blood rite. And I'm going to talk about the blood rite later. I can't. But like, for what? You know, like, you're just like, he spent so much time there. What was it, like a week? And it's like just standing around waiting for Eris while your mate is like literally about to die. Like, I know that Cassian can't go in, but I just don't think that the way that part of the plot went about was realistic. Personally, it just didn't work for me. And okay, now we're going to talk about the blood rite. How did they manage to win the blood rite when they have been training for a couple months against 100-year-old Illyrian warriors who have trained their whole lives for this? The fact that they survived is already surprising. So the fact that they won, and only like 5 people have won in the entire Night Court history, and these 2 girls won, and they've been practicing for a few months. Like, I know that Sarah J. Maas wants to be all like feminism, but it's not realistic at all. And the fact that Nessa was fighting off 6 Illyrian warriors at once and still managed to like beat them. Like, yeah, you were trained by Cassian, but these Illyrian warriors have been training their whole lives for this. Ooh, I love the scene when Cassian turned the knife on himself in the blood rite. Honestly, the blood rite, I think it was great. You know, there was so much tension and suspense, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And I really loved the politics dude that helped Nessa. I really wanted to see more of him, but he didn't appear. Maybe we'll see him in the next book, but probably not. But I really liked him. But yeah, I just don't think that the blood rite was realistic. Honestly, at that point, I just wanted the book to be over. I was like, yeah, this is so unrealistic. This is like weird. I don't want to read anymore. I really love the scene when Nessa got the mask in the lake. Ooh, that was so good. Like, there was so much suspense, and like, I thought she was gonna die, and I just really loved it. Especially because Cassian couldn't come save her and she saved herself. So I loved that. But then by the end, Cassian saved her, but whatever. Very confused by the Eris and Moore situation. I thought that we would get more insight of this in this book, because it was very ambiguous in the previous books, but we didn't get any more information on it, so I was a little bit confused. And I wish we got more of the Band of Exiles, so Lucian, Bassa, Jurian, but we didn't. Well, I don't care about Bassa, but I just wish we got more of Lucian. Oh my god, I love him, but he was only in like 2 scenes. That was so sad. Ooh, and I really loved the heart-to-heart Solstice scene with Nessa and Cassian when they just confess their love. We stand. That was really cute. Something I'm really confused about is Nessa's power. What is her power? We know that her power is death, but she can't kill people, and she can't like bring back the dead without the mask. So what's her power? We had the scene where Nessa has this nightmare, which I thought was a great scene, probably the best scene. I love that scene. A great scene. Mwah. And then like Rhysand came. I don't know why he came, but he came, sure. I'm sorry, but that scene was so funny when Rhysand was like, ooh, good lighting from my laptop. That scene was so funny when Rhysand was like, oh, and Cassian was like, what? And Azrael was like, what is her power? And Rhysand's like, death. Her power is death. And I'm like, okay, but like, what does that mean? It was just really funny. It's like when they said that Mora's power is truth, but like she doesn't even know the truth, because in Akawar, when Feyre and Rhysand were set up to be captured or whatever at Highburn, like Mora didn't know that. So like, how is her power truth? Like, you don't even know the truth. Like, I think Sarah J. Maas doesn't even know Nessa's power. Sarah J. Maas doesn't even know Moore's power. She's like, her power is death, her power is truth, but like I don't even know what that means. So in A Court of Wings and Frost and Wings and Ruin, Faye and Rhysand have sex in the library below the House of Wind. And first I didn't see anything wrong with it. Like a lot of people were like, that's a place for like rape victims. Why would they do that in the library? And honestly, and I feel bad to say this, but I didn't see it as a big deal because I was like, oh, no one's around, like it's fine. But as we got more of a backstory of the priestesses, I was like, Rhysand knows about this and he still did that in the library? Are you kidding me? Like, it was so weird to me. Like, Rhysand was there when Gwyn was R-worded. I mean, he came afterwards. And you still chose to do that with Feyre in the priestess library of rape victims? Like, why? I'm sorry, that's just really weird and like disrespectful. Oh, there was also this conversation about Rhysand becoming the High King of Prythian, which I think was so stupid. I feel like it might play into a bigger role in the next book. They kind of introduced it in this book. So instead of just being the High Lord of the Night Court, he might just rule all over Prythian, and they think some courts will be okay with that. And I would just like to say to Rhysand, fix your problems in your own court first. Fix the misogyny in your war camps. Fix the Velaris slums. You know, you hate poor people so much, so... I mean, they tore down the apartment for poor people. Nessa's apartment, okay? So... like, fix the problems in your city first before you're gonna become High King. Like, look at your own city. Oh my god, like, I love that, like, I just hate Rhysand now. Like, don't get me wrong, I still love him in the first series. If I'm rereading Akamath right now, I'll still be like, yes, Rhysand, I love you, King. But because I'm talking about this book right now, I'm just gonna be straight up that I hate Rhysand. Ew. The last thing I want to talk about is... oh my god, why are people so loud? Why are my neighbors so loud today? The last thing I wanted to talk about is... oh, and this makes me really angry. Oh my god, can you shut up, please? So the last thing that I wanted to talk... please bear with me. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was the extra chapter, the bonus chapter in Azrael's perspective. Oh my gosh. Rhysand, what the heck? So if you haven't read the exclusive Azrael chapter in Azrael's perspective, basically what happened was it took place on the night of Solstice. After everyone went to bed, Azrael and Elaine were downstairs and they exchanged gifts. They each got gifts for each other. And then I think Azrael like kissed Elaine's neck or something like that. I don't really remember. And they were about to kiss, but then Rhysand spoke to Azrael in the mind and was like, come here now. So Azrael leaves and then he goes to Rhysand. And Rhysand says, allow me to make one thing very clear. You are to stay away from her. And Azrael says, you can't order me to do that. And Rhysand says, oh, I can, and I will. If Lucien finds out you're pursuing her, something. The point was that if Azrael pursued Elaine, this would be bad for their alliance with the Autumn Court because Lucien is Elaine's mate. So it's just really bad for politics, bad for the war. They need the alliance. So because of that, he ordered Azrael not to pursue Elaine, and I have a lot of problems with this. Firstly, Rhysand is all about choice. You know, he literally says in this book, you will always have a choice in Velaris. When Azrael says you can't order me to do that, and he says I can and I will. Like, I thought you said you always have a choice in Velaris. I thought you were about choice, and now you're literally controlling someone's relationship. My second problem with this is that it implies that Elaine belongs to Lucien. You know, Azrael can't pursue Elaine because basically she's Lucien's mate. She's Lucien's. You can't interfere with that. Which I'm just like, Elaine belongs to no one. Elaine doesn't want Lucien. So why should her relationship with Azrael be affected by Lucien? Elaine doesn't belong to him, which Rhysand doesn't seem to understand. Because apparently if you're mates, then Elaine suddenly cannot be with Azrael. It's so weird. The fact that he didn't let her because the problem was that it affected politics. But the thing is, Rhysand pursued Feyre. And he did. It may have taken him a while, but he still did. He pursued Feyre despite it affecting politics on an even larger scale because she was getting married to the High Lord of the Spring Court and they needed the Spring Court for the war. So Rhysand pursuing Feyre affected politics on an even larger scale. But Azrael cannot pursue Elaine because it will affect politics with the Autumn Court. The hypocrisy, the lack of feminism. And I say feminism because he's giving Elaine no options. Elaine wants Azrael. I'm sure Rhysand knows that because he could sense whatever was going downstairs. And he's just not giving her that opportunity to try things with Azrael. Like, I thought you were about choice. What the heck? Rhysand stressed that Feyre belonged to no one. Somewhere in the old Agatar books, she belongs to no one. But then suddenly Elaine belongs to Lucian. I can't. And then moreover, on the Azrael chapter, I feel like, okay, I love Azrael. He's this like quiet dude. Love him. But then in his perspective, he was literally dumbed down to this like horny male again, like Cassian, like in Cassian's perspective, like in Rhysand's perspective. If Sarah is gonna keep like writing these wondrous male characters and then she's gonna write in their perspective and they're just dumbed down to like horny beings, like sure, like some people might want to read that. Sure, Sarah wants to write that, good for her. My personal preference is like I don't want to keep reading about that, like when Cassian was like, oh my god, Nessa's so thin, she's so sick, but look at her boobs, like it was weird. And then like same with Azrael. Now in his perspective, I'm like, I mean, I get it, he likes her, whatever, sure. Thank you for watching this very, very long review. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm so curious to know. I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.